The massive halls of Nexus Prime buzzed with the sound of 1,000 different voices. Alien beings from across the galaxy moved through the corridors, their strange forms casting odd shadows under the bright lights. Some walked on two legs like humans, others floated in anti-grav suits, and a few slithered across the polished floors on dozens of tentacles. Ambassador Elena Vasquez checked her tablet as she walked toward the main council chamber. Today's meeting would cover the usual topics: mining rights in the Outer Spiral, trade disputes between the Krillian Empire and the Zephyrian Swarm, and requests for military escorts through pirate-infested space lanes. Nothing too exciting, which was exactly how Elena preferred it. The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for 30 years now. In that time, they had earned a reputation as skilled negotiators and reliable trade partners. Other species found humans useful for settling disputes because they seemed to have no major territorial ambitions. Earth controlled only 12 star systems, barely a speck compared to empires that spanned thousands of worlds. Elena entered the Great Chamber and took her seat in the human section. The chamber was a marvel of engineering, a perfect sphere, with seats arranged on multiple levels, each section designed for different alien anatomies. Gravity fields kept everyone properly oriented, no matter which direction they were facing. The Krillian delegation sat in the center, as always. Their massive forms filled specially reinforced seats, and their war leader, General Thrax, wore the traditional armor of his species even in civilian meetings. The Krillians had built the largest fleet in the galaxy through centuries of conquest and warfare. Their dreadnoughts were legendary. Some stretched 50 kilometers from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. To Elena's left, the insectoid Zephyrians chittered among themselves in their section. Their ships were smaller but numerous, designed to swarm enemies like angry wasps. The crystalline Vorthak delegates glowed softly in the ultraviolet spectrum, their energy-based weapons technology making them valuable allies to anyone who could afford their services. The aquatic deep-current representatives floated in their water-filled sphere, their bioships grown rather than built. Each species brought something unique to the Galactic Defense Network, overseen by the mighty Hegemony Fleet. Elena smiled slightly as she remembered her first council meeting 3 decades ago. The other delegates had asked what humanity could contribute to galactic defense. Earth's small fleet of frigates and destroyers had seemed almost embarrassing compared to the massive war fleets of the established powers. But the ships had performed well in their limited roles, escorting trade convoys and patrolling quiet sectors. There was something the other species found puzzling about human warships, though Elena had never quite understood what. Their armor, plating was made from materials that confused alien sensors, and the energy signatures from their engines didn't match any known technology. But since Earth's military contribution was so small, nobody bothered to investigate further. The council session began with routine business. A dispute over asteroid mining rights in the Centauri cluster was resolved through careful negotiation. Trade agreements were renewed between several species. Elena helped mediate a disagreement between 2 merchant guilds, finding a compromise that satisfied both parties. Everything was perfectly normal until the emergency klaxons began to sound. The chamber fell silent as the massive holographic display in the center flickered to life. Admiral Corvin of the Hegemony Fleet appeared, his blue-scaled face grim with worry. Behind him, Elena could see the bridge of his flagship, alive with urgent activity. "Council members," Admiral Corvin began, his translator converting his words into dozens of languages simultaneously. "We have detected massive energy signatures emerging from the galactic void. Long-range sensors are tracking multiple contacts approaching the outer rim at incredible speeds." General Thrax leaned forward in his seat. "How many contacts, Admiral?" "Unknown. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to be artificial constructs, but the technology is completely foreign to our understanding." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The galactic void was the empty space between galaxies, a region so vast and barren that nothing was supposed to exist there. What could possibly emerge from such a place? The Vorthak delegate's crystal form pulsed with concerned colors. Could these be ships from another galaxy? Perhaps refugees or explorers? Admiral Corvin shook his head. "Negative. The energy patterns are aggressive in nature. Whatever these things are, they're heading directly for our outer colonies. And they're accelerating." The chamber erupted in dozens of different languages as delegates demanded more information. Elena remained quiet, watching the data streams on her tablet as reports flooded in from sensor stations across the outer rim. The unknown contacts were indeed massive, and they were moving with purpose. Then came the first casualty report. Council members, Admiral Corvin's voice cut through the chaos. We have lost contact with mining station Epsilon 7 in the Kepler system. The station's emergency beacon activated briefly before going dark. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by unknown vessels. The arguing stopped. Everyone in the chamber understood what this meant. Epsilon 7 had a population of 50,000 beings from a dozen different species. If it had gone dark, those people were likely dead. More reports followed over the next hour. Colony after colony fell silent as the unknown attackers swept through the outer rim like a plague. Refugee ships began streaming toward the inner systems, carrying terrified survivors with impossible stories. Elena listened to the reports with growing horror. The survivors spoke of ships that seemed to eat light itself, weapons that unraveled matter at the molecular level, and swarms of mechanical creatures that stripped entire worlds bare in a matter of hours. Some refugees claimed the attackers were harvesting not just resources, but the very atoms that made up planets and moons. An old deep-current elder, his aquatic form trembling in his life support sphere, spoke in a voice filled with ancient dread. "The Devourers," he whispered. "The legends were true, they have returned." The chamber fell silent again. Every species had stories about the Devourers, ancient mechanical entities that had supposedly consumed entire star systems before the current galactic civilization arose. Most historians considered them myths, cautionary tales told to young ones about the dangers of uncontrolled artificial intelligence. But the dead worlds scattered throughout the galaxy told a different story. Planets stripped down to their cores, their matter converted into something else entirely. Star systems with no planets at all, just asteroid fields that didn't match any natural formation. The ruins were ancient, predating all current civilizations, but they were real. General Thrax stood, his massive form casting a shadow over nearby delegates. "Myths or not, we face a clear threat. I recommend immediate mobilization of the full hegemony fleet. We must stop these invaders before they reach the core worlds." Admiral Corvin nodded grimly. "Already in progress, General. Every available warship is being recalled to staging areas. We estimate we can field over 2,000 vessels within the week." Elena felt a mixture of awe and fear. 2,000 warships represented the combined military might of dozens of species. The Krillian Empire alone was contributing 400 heavy dreadnoughts. The Zephyrian swarm would provide 800 smaller vessels. Even the peaceful Deep Current were sending their bioships to join the fight. As for humanity's contribution, Elena's orders were simple. Earth would provide its small fleet of frigates and destroyers, maybe 30 ships total, not enough to matter in a battle of this scale, but every ship would count. The council session ended with emergency war authorizations and resource allocations. Species that had been rivals for centuries now worked together, united by the threat from the void. As delegates rushed to contact their homeworlds, Elena remained in her seat, staring at the holographic display showing the advancing enemy. Something deep in her mind whispered that this would not end well. The greatest fleet ever assembled was preparing to face an enemy that had once devoured entire civilizations. She could only hope that 30 years of peace had made the galaxy strong enough to survive what was coming. But looking at the data, streaming in from the outer rim, Elena feared it would not be enough. The emergency session had lasted 18 hours. Elena rubbed her tired eyes as she reviewed the final casualty reports from the outer rim. 23 colonies destroyed, 47 mining stations stripped bare. Nearly 2 million beings dead or missing, their fate unknown but probably terrible. The survivors who made it to the inner systems all told the same horrifying story. The Devourers didn't just destroy, they consumed. Entire planets were being broken down into their basic materials, converted into more ships for the growing swarm. The enemy fleet was getting larger with each world they devoured. Elena walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, passing groups of military officers from different species huddled around holographic displays. The great mobilization was underway. Transport ships filled with troops moved through hyperspace toward staging areas. Weapons factories worked around the clock to produce ammunition. Every available civilian vessel had been converted into a support ship for the coming battle. She found Admiral Corvin in the Tactical Planning Center, surrounded by charts and data screens. The Hegemony Fleet Commander looked like he hadn't slept in days, his blue scales dulled with exhaustion. "Ambassador Vasquez." He greeted her with a tired nod. "I was hoping to speak with you about Earth's contribution to the fleet." Elena pulled up the human military roster on her tablet. "We have 31 ships available, Admiral. 12 frigates, 16 destroyers, 2 light cruisers, and 1 diplomatic vessel. Not much compared to what the other species are providing, but they're at your disposal." Admiral Corvin studied the numbers. "Every ship matters now. Your frigates can handle escort duties, keep our supply lines protected while the heavy warships engage the enemy directly." That was what Elena had expected. Human ships had always been assigned to support roles: convoy escort, patrol duty, search and rescue. They were competent vessels, but nothing special compared to the massive dreadnoughts and swarm fighters of the major powers. "There is one thing I should mention," Elena said carefully. "Our ships have some unusual characteristics that might be relevant to the coming battle. The armor plating is made from materials that seem to confuse sensor readings, and the energy signatures from our drives don't match standard classifications." The Admiral nodded absently. "Yes, we've noticed that in previous joint operations. Some kind of advanced metallurgy, I assume. Earth's material science has always been impressive." Elena didn't correct him. The truth was she didn't fully understand human military technology herself. Earth's ship designers kept their secrets close, sharing only what was necessary for basic fleet coordination. But she had always suspected there was more to human vessels than met the eye. The tactical briefing began an hour later. Representatives from every major species gathered around a massive holographic display showing the current battle zone. The Devourers had swept through 12 star systems in the past week, leaving nothing but empty space and debris fields behind them. "Our best intelligence estimates put the enemy fleet at approximately 3,000 vessels," Admiral Corvin announced. "They range in size from small interceptors to massive harvester ships over 100 kilometers long. All of them appear to be artificial constructs, probably controlled by some form of collective intelligence." General Thrax pointed at the display with one of his armored claws. "Our strategy is simple. We intercept them here, at the Kepler Nebula, before they can reach the core systems. The nebula will disrupt their sensors while providing cover for our smaller ships." Elena studied the battle plan. It was straightforward but dangerous. The combined fleet would form a defensive line across the enemy's path, using the nebula's electromagnetic interference to mask their positions until the last moment. When the Devourers arrived, they would face the full might of galactic civilization in one decisive battle. The next few days passed in a blur of final preparations. Elena watched from the observation deck of her diplomatic cruiser as the greatest fleet in recorded history assembled at the Kepler Nebula. Thousands of warships from dozens of species moved into position, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. At the center of the formation sat the Krillian Super Dreadnought Worldbreaker, a monster of a ship that stretched nearly 80 kilometers from bow to stern. Its weapons could shatter moons, and its armor had never been penetrated in 3 centuries of warfare. Around it moved the other flagships: the Zephyrian Hive Carrier Swarm Mother, the Vorthak energy ship Prismlight, the Deep Current Bio Vessel. Growing Tide, Elena's own ship, the Earth vessel Harmony, seemed tiny by comparison. Along with the rest of the human contingent, it was positioned at the rear of the formation, assigned to protect the supply ships and medical vessels. A safe position, but one that made Elena feel oddly uncomfortable. Something about hiding in the back while others fought didn't sit well with her. The enemy arrived exactly when predicted. Long-range sensors detected the Devourer fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their ships dark and angular against the stars. They moved with eerie coordination, like a school of mechanical fish heading directly for the nebula where the defenders waited. "All ships, this is Admiral Corvin," the fleet commander's voice echoed across thousands of vessels. "Today we make our stand. Today we prove that the galaxy will not go quietly into the dark. All ships prepare for battle." Elena watched from her ship's bridge as the enemy fleet approached. Through the powerful sensors of the Harmony, she could see the Devourer vessels clearly for the first time. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek, organic-looking ships that seemed to flow through space like living creatures. But she could also see the weapon ports that lined their hulls and the strange energy fields that surrounded them. The battle began when the first Devourer ships entered the nebula. The Allied fleet opened fire with everything they had: particle beams, plasma cannons, missile barrages, and exotic weapons that turned space itself into a weapon. The nebula lit up like a miniature galaxy, as thousands of energy weapons fired at once. For a moment, Elena thought they might actually win. Several Devourer ships exploded under the massive barrage, their strange hulls unable to withstand the concentrated firepower of an entire galactic fleet. The Worldbreaker's main guns alone destroyed 3 enemy vessels with a single salvo. Then the Devourers began to adapt. Elena watched in horror as the enemy ships started to change. Their hulls rippled and shifted, developing new configurations that deflected the incoming fire. Energy beams that had carved through their armor moments before now scattered harmlessly off their modified surfaces. Missiles that should have destroyed them were absorbed and converted into raw materials. "Admiral, their ships are evolving," came a panicked transmission from one of the Zephyrian vessels. "Our weapons are becoming less effective with each shot." Admiral Corbin's voice remained calm, but Elena could hear the concern beneath it. "All ships, switch to secondary weapon systems. Use everything you have. They can't adapt to all of our technologies at once." But they could. With each passing minute, the Devourer ships became more resistant to the Allied attacks. Their own weapons began to fire. Strange energy beams that seemed to unmake matter at the molecular level. Ships that were hit didn't just explode, they simply stopped existing, leaving not even debris behind. The Prism Light, pride of the Vorthak fleet, was the first major casualty. A Devourer beam hit its crystal hull, and the entire ship dissolved into component atoms in seconds. The growing tide lasted longer, its bioarmor trying to regenerate faster than it was being destroyed, but eventually it too was reduced to nothing. Elena felt sick as she watched ship after ship disappear from the tactical display. The Swarm Mother launched every fighter it carried. Thousands of small craft that swarmed around the enemy vessels like angry insects. For a few minutes it seemed like the smaller ships might succeed where the larger ones had failed. But the Devourers adapted to that too. New weapons appeared on their hulls, point defense systems that methodically destroyed every fighter that came within range. "All ships fall back," Admiral Corvin finally ordered. "Retreat to Rally Point Beta. This is not a defeat. We're regrouping for another attack." But Elena knew better. This wasn't a tactical withdrawal, it was a rout. Of the 2,000 ships that had entered the battle, fewer than 300 were still functional. The mighty Worldbreaker was limping away on emergency power, half its hull simply gone. The greatest military force in galactic history had been shattered in less than 6 hours. As her ship fled through hyperspace toward the inner systems, Elena tried to process what she had witnessed. The Devourers weren't just ancient weapons, they were adaptive weapons, capable of evolving to counter any threat. 30 years of galactic peace had made the combined fleets powerful, but they had never faced an enemy like this. She opened a secure communication channel to Earth, using the special codes reserved for extreme emergencies. The message was brief but clear. "Contact lost with Hegemony Fleet. Devourers confirmed active. Request immediate consultation with command." The response came back within minutes, surprising her with its speed. But the content surprised her even more. "Understood, Ambassador. Maintain position and await further orders. Assets are being positioned." Elena stared at the screen in disbelief. Admiral Sarah Chen looked completely human, but she commanded ships that Elena had never seen before in 30 years of diplomatic service. The vessels surrounding her diplomatic cruiser were enormous, each one easily 3 times the size of the largest Krillian dreadnought. "Admiral Chen," Elena managed to say, "I don't understand. Where did these ships come from?" "Our records show Earth's entire fleet was destroyed with the Hegemony force." The Admiral's expression remained calm and professional. "Negative, Ambassador. What you saw destroyed was our public fleet, the ships we allowed other species to observe and catalog. These vessels represent Earth's actual military capability." Elena felt her worldview shifting beneath her feet. "You mean Earth has been hiding warships? For how long?" "Since we joined the Galactic Council 30 years ago. Longer, actually. We've been building and positioning these assets throughout the galaxy since first contact." Admiral Chen paused as if considering how much to reveal. "Ambassador, with respect, you were never briefed on this because your role was diplomatic. Your job was to represent Earth's interests in the Council, not manage our military secrets." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. For 3 decades, she had negotiated as the representative of a minor species with limited military power. She had accepted humanity's position as junior partners in galactic civilization, useful for their diplomatic skills but militarily insignificant. And all that time, Earth had been hiding a fleet that dwarfed anything she had ever imagined. "How many ships?" she asked quietly. "Enough," Admiral Chen replied. "Ambassador, I'm sending new orders to your navigation system. Please proceed to coordinates Tango 7 Alpha and maintain position there. This battle zone is about to become very dangerous." Elena's sensor officer called out again. Admiral, more ships decloaking. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. Elena watched in awe as human vessels materialized throughout the system. They hadn't been hidden in some distant base or secret shipyard. They had been here all along, cloaked and invisible, watching the battle unfold. Some were emerging from what she had thought was empty space near the gas giant. Others appeared to have been hiding inside the rings of the outer planets, their signatures masked by the natural electromagnetic interference. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Elena's long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures awakening throughout the galaxy. In system after system, human ships were decloaking and revealing themselves. The network was vast. Hundreds of vessels positioned at strategic points, all connected by some kind of quantum communication system. My God, Elena whispered. You've been watching everything. Every battle, every conflict, every crisis. You've been there all along. Admiral Chen nodded. Earth's policy has always been to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. We've been monitoring galactic civilization for decades, ready to intervene if a true existential threat emerged. The Devourers qualify. Elena tried to process the scale of what she was seeing. Earth hadn't just built a secret fleet. They had created a hidden guardian network that spanned the entire galaxy. While other species had focused on territorial expansion and political maneuvering, humanity had quietly positioned itself to protect everyone. Why? She asked. Why keep it secret? With this kind of military power, Earth could have been the dominant species in the galaxy. Because dominance was never our goal, Admiral Chen replied. We learned from our own history that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Better to remain in the shadows, trusted by all sides, than to become another empire that others would eventually unite against. Elena's communication console lit up with dozens of incoming transmissions. Other surviving ships from the hegemony fleet had detected the human vessels and were demanding explanations. Admiral Corvin's battered flagship was requesting immediate consultation. General Thrax was broadcasting challenges and demands for information, but Admiral Chen ignored them all. Her attention was focused on something else entirely. The long-range sensor displays showing the Devourer fleet's approach. Ambassador, you need to move to the safe zone now, Chen said urgently. The enemy will be here within the hour, and when they arrive, they're going to discover that their usual tactics won't work against human technology. Elena gave the order for her ship to withdraw, but she couldn't resist asking one more question. What makes our ships different? How can we succeed where the combined might of the galaxy failed? Admiral Chen smiled for the first time during their conversation. Because while everyone else was building bigger guns and thicker armor, we were solving a more fundamental problem. We weren't trying to build ships that could destroy anything. We were building ships that nothing could destroy. As Elena's diplomatic cruiser moved to the designated safe zone, she watched the human fleet position itself for battle. Their movements were unlike anything she had ever seen. The ships didn't follow normal physics. They seemed to fade in and out of normal space, appearing in one location and then materializing somewhere else without crossing the space between. Her ship's science officer, a young human named David Park, was studying the sensor readings with fascination. Ambassador, these energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. The drive systems appear to be manipulating space-time itself, creating localized distortions that allow near-instantaneous movement. Is that possible? Elena asked. David shook his head in wonder. According to everything we know about physics, no, but apparently Earth scientists know something the rest of the galaxy doesn't. Elena was beginning to realize just how much Earth scientists knew that others didn't. The ships positioning themselves for battle represented technology that was decades, maybe centuries ahead of anything else in known space. While the galaxy had been content with incremental improvements to existing systems, humanity had been revolutionizing the fundamental principles of space warfare. The Devourers arrived exactly on schedule, their dark fleet dropping out of hyperspace. With the same eerie coordination they had displayed at the Kepler Nebula, Elena counted over 4,000 vessels now. Their numbers had grown as they consumed the wreckage of the defeated hegemony fleet and the worlds they had devoured. They moved toward the human defensive line with obvious confidence. Why shouldn't they be confident? They had just destroyed the greatest military force in galactic history. What could a few dozen human ships do that 2,000 allied vessels could not? Elena was about to find out. The first Devourer attack waves struck the human line, their weapons designed to unmake matter at the molecular level. Energy beams that had dissolved Krillian dreadnoughts struck human ships and simply stopped. The attacks didn't bounce off shields or get absorbed by armor. They hit some kind of barrier and ceased to exist as if they had never been fired at all. Impossible, Elena breathed, watching the sensor readings. What kind of defense system can do that? David Park was frantically running calculations on his console. I'm reading massive gravitational distortions around each human ship. It's like they're surrounded by localized space-time anomalies. The enemy weapons are being redirected into somewhere else entirely. Elena watched as the Devourers adapted to this new development, just as they had adapted to the weapons of the hegemony fleet. Their ships began to shift and change, developing new attack methods designed to overcome whatever protection the human vessels were using. But then the human ships began their counterattack, and Elena realized that Earth's secret went far deeper than advanced defense systems. The human weapons were unlike anything she had ever imagined. Instead of firing energy, beams, or launching missiles, they seemed to reach out through space and simply touch their targets. Where they touched, Devourer ships didn't explode or dissolve. They folded in on themselves, collapsing into points of light that then vanished entirely. They're not destroying the enemy ships, David said in amazement. They're sending them somewhere else. Some kind of dimensional displacement technology. More Devourer vessels moved to attack and more disappeared under the strange human weapons. But Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. The human ships weren't moving to engage the entire enemy fleet. They were positioning themselves in a specific formation, as if they were planning something much larger than individual ship combat. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system, addressing not just Elena, but apparently every surviving ship in the system. All Allied vessels maintain safe distance. We are about to demonstrate why Earth has remained hidden for so long. What you are about to witness is classified at the highest levels, but current circumstances require full disclosure. Elena gripped her command chair as she watched the human fleet complete its formation. The ships had arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern, their positions creating some kind of massive array. Energy began to flow between them, connecting each vessel to all the others in a web of power that made Elena's sensors scream, warnings about impossible energy levels. What are they doing? She whispered. Admiral Chen's voice answered her unspoken question. We are going to end this threat permanently. The Devourers have proven they can adapt to any conventional weapon, so we're not using conventional weapons. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. The great chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with fearful whispers in dozens of languages as delegates struggled to understand what they had witnessed. The holographic displays still showed the empty space where 4,000 Devourer ships had simply vanished from existence. Elena stood at the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon her. As Earth's representative, she had been called to explain humanity's actions. The problem was she didn't fully understand them herself. Admiral Corvin spoke first, his blue-scaled face showing exhaustion and confusion in equal measure. Ambassador Vasquez, the surviving ships of the hegemony fleet recorded energy readings that our scientists cannot explain. Human vessels appeared to manipulate space and time itself during the battle. We need to understand how this is possible. Before Elena could respond, General Thrax rose from his seat, his massive armored form casting shadows across the chamber floor. More importantly, we need to understand why Earth has been hiding this capability. The Krillian Empire has been providing military protection for the galaxy for centuries, suffering massive casualties in the process. Meanwhile, humans have possessed the ability to end any threat instantly, and you chose to remain silent. Elena felt the anger in his words, and she understood it. How many Krillian warriors had died in battles that Earth could have ended without a single casualty? How many worlds had been lost to threats that human technology could have stopped? General Thrax, Elena began carefully. I want to be clear that I was not aware of Earth's full military capabilities until yesterday. My role has always been diplomatic, not military. But I can share what I have learned from Admiral Chen and her staff. She activated her tablet, displaying the data that Earth's military had finally agreed to share with the Council. The information was staggering in its scope and implications. Earth's defensive strategy has been based on a principle called invisible protection, Elena explained. Rather than seeking galactic dominance, we chose to position ourselves as secret guardians. For the past 30 years, human ships have been hidden throughout the galaxy, monitoring potential threats and preparing to intervene only if conventional forces proved insufficient. The Vorthak delegate's crystalline form pulsed with suspicious colors. You have been spying on all of us, watching our military operations, our political discussions, our private communications. This is a violation of galactic trust on an unprecedented scale. Elena nodded, acknowledging the accusation. Yes, we have been watching, but not for conquest or political advantage. Our monitoring was focused entirely on identifying potential extinction-level threats to galactic civilization. A Zephyrian clicked angrily from their section. And you decided unilaterally what constituted such a threat? Without consulting the Council or seeking input from other species? This is exactly the kind of arrogance that leads to tyranny. Elena could feel the mood in the chamber shifting toward hostility. The other species were beginning to see humanity not as saviors who had protected them from the devourers, but as manipulative overlords who had been pulling strings from the shadows. Understand your concerns, Elena said, raising her voice to address the entire chamber. But consider the alternative. If Earth had revealed its true capabilities 30 years ago, would galactic civilization have remained peaceful? Or would it have led to an arms race, with every species trying to develop weapons to counter human technology? Admiral Corvin's expression was troubled. You're suggesting that hiding your strength was actually a form of peacekeeping? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Elena replied. Earth's leadership studied galactic history before joining the Council. Every time a species achieved overwhelming military superiority, it led to either conquest or a coalition war to destroy them. We chose a third option: remain hidden while preventing any single threat from becoming too dangerous. General Thrax's laugh was harsh and bitter. How convenient for you. Stay in the shadows while the rest of us fight and die, then emerge as heroes when the situation becomes desperate enough. Elena felt a flash of anger at the unfairness of his accusation. General, how many human diplomats have died mediating conflicts that could have escalated into wars? How many human trade vessels have been lost protecting shipping lanes? We may have hidden our military strength, but we never avoided our responsibilities to galactic civilization. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered her words. Elena could see the internal struggle on many faces. Gratitude for humanity's intervention against the devourers, warring with fear and resentment over the deception. The deep-current elder, who had first mentioned the devourers, spoke in his ancient, wavering voice. The question now is not what Earth did in the past, but what it plans to do in the future. Ambassador, your species possesses the ability to destroy any fleet, conquer any world, or eliminate any civilization that opposes them. What assurance can you give us that humanity will not use this power for conquest? Elena had been dreading this question because she didn't have a good answer. Earth's leadership had given her authority to negotiate, but they hadn't told her what limits they were willing to accept on their power. I can only speak to humanity's actions over the past 30 years, she said finally. We have had the capability to dominate the galaxy for decades, and we chose not to. That should count for something. Should it? The question came from an unexpected source. The Altarian delegate, whose species rarely spoke in council sessions. Your Admiral Chen made it clear that Earth has been watching everything, analyzing everything, preparing for everything. You know our military capabilities, our political weaknesses, our economic vulnerabilities. From our perspective, you have already conquered us. You simply haven't chosen to occupy our worlds yet. Elena realized that this was the heart of the problem. Trust once broken was almost impossible to rebuild. The other species now saw every human action through the lens of hidden agenda and secret manipulation. Even Earth's protection against the devourers would be viewed with suspicion. Then what do you want? Elena asked, addressing the entire chamber. Earth cannot undo what we've done. We cannot make ourselves weaker or give up our technological advantages. So what would it take for you to trust us going forward? The chamber erupted in dozens of simultaneous conversations as delegates debated among themselves. Elena caught fragments of discussion. Demands for technology sharing, proposals for joint command structures, suggestions for formal limitations on human military power. Admiral Corvin called for order, and gradually the chamber quieted. Ambassador, the Council requires time to discuss this situation privately. We request that you withdraw while we deliberate. Elena nodded and left the chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares on her back. In the corridor outside, she found Admiral Chen waiting for her, dressed in a simple uniform that somehow made her seem more intimidating than any amount of armor or decoration would have. How do you think it went? Admiral Chen asked with a slight smile. Terribly, Elena replied honestly. They're scared of us, and rightfully so. We've fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy, and nobody likes surprises on that scale. Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. Fear was always a possible outcome. Earth's leadership has contingency plans for various scenarios, including the possibility that other species might unite against us. Elena felt a chill at the casual way the Admiral discussed what would essentially be another galactic war. And what would happen in that scenario? We would win, Admiral Chen said simply. But victory would mean the end of galactic civilization as we know it. Earth would become the dominant species not by choice but by necessity. It's an outcome we'd prefer to avoid. They walked in silence toward Elena's temporary office, passing groups of alien delegates who whispered among themselves and fell silent when they spotted the two humans. Elena could feel the fear and suspicion in the air, thick as smoke. "Admiral, can I ask you something?" Elena said as they reached her office door. "Of course. When you were watching all these years, monitoring our communications and our military operations, what did you think of us? The other species, I mean. Did you see us as children who needed protection? As potential threats that needed watching? Or as equals who deserved the truth?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Honestly, we saw you as family, younger siblings maybe, who were still learning how dangerous the galaxy could be. Earth's policy has always been based on the idea that all intelligent species deserve to survive and thrive. The secrecy wasn't because we didn't trust you, it was because we didn't trust the universe to leave you alone." Elena felt tears forming. In her eyes, though, she wasn't sure if they were from sadness or relief. "And now? After today?" "Now we've shown our hand," Admiral Chen replied. "The galaxy knows what we're capable of, and that changes everything. We can't go back to being the quiet species that nobody pays attention to. From now on, every decision Earth makes will be seen through the lens of our power." As if summoned by their conversation, Elena's communication device chimed with an urgent message from the council chamber. The deliberations were over. Elena walked back into the council chamber with Admiral Chen beside her, feeling like she was walking toward her own execution. The atmosphere had changed during their absence. The fearful whispers had been replaced by a tense, determined silence. Delegates sat rigid in their seats, their expressions unreadable. Admiral Corvin stood at the central podium, his blue-scaled hands gripping the edge so tightly that Elena could see the strain in his muscles. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. "Ambassador Vasquez, Admiral Chen, the Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding Earth's future role in galactic affairs." Elena braced herself for demands, ultimatums, or perhaps even a declaration of war. Instead, what came next surprised her more than anything else that had happened in the past week. "We formally request that humanity accept the role of primary Galactic Defense Force," Admiral Corvin announced. "All member species agree to subordinate their military commands to Earth's authority in matters of galactic security." Elena blinked in confusion. I don't understand. You're asking us to take control of the galaxy's defense?" General Thrax rose from his seat, his massive form somehow looking smaller than usual. "Ambassador, the Krillian Empire has served as the galaxy's primary military power for 3 centuries. In that time, we have lost millions of warriors to threats that your technology could have eliminated without a single casualty. We cannot continue to sacrifice our people when a better option exists." The Vorthak delegate's crystal form pulsed with resigned colors. The battle against the Devourers made one thing clear: conventional military technology is obsolete. Earth's capabilities represent the only reliable defense against extinction-level threats. Elena looked around the chamber, seeing the same expression on every alien face: tired acceptance mixed with desperate hope. These weren't the faces of beings making a political calculation. These were the faces of parents who wanted their children to survive, of leaders who had watched their fleets be destroyed by an enemy their weapons couldn't touch. "There are conditions," Admiral Corvin continued. "Earth must establish a joint command structure with representatives from all major species. Military decisions that affect member worlds must be made transparently, with full council oversight. And most importantly, Earth must share enough technology with other species to ensure that no single power controls galactic defense forever." Admiral Chen stepped forward, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "Admiral Corvin, Earth appreciates the Council's trust, but we need to be clear about what you're asking. You want us to give up the very secrecy that allowed us to protect you effectively for 30 years. You want us to share technologies that could be misused by any species that chooses to pursue conquest instead of cooperation." A Zephyrian delegate clicked nervously. "The alternative is living under the constant threat that humanity might decide we are the next problem to be eliminated. At least if we share command authority, we have some influence over our own fate. Elena realized that the Council's decision wasn't really about trust or cooperation. It was about fear management. The other species couldn't live with the knowledge that Earth could eliminate them at will, so they were trying to create a system that gave them some illusion of control. There's another issue, Elena said carefully. Earth's military technology isn't just advanced. It's dangerous in ways you might not understand. The weapons we used against the Devourers manipulate fundamental forces of reality. In the wrong hands, they could damage the fabric of space-time itself. The Deep Current Elder spoke in his ancient voice. Then perhaps it is time for all of us to become worthy of such power. The galaxy has been content with incremental advancement for too long. Maybe working alongside humanity will force us to grow. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, clearly communicating with someone through a quantum link Elena couldn't detect. Finally, she nodded. Earth Command has authorized me to accept the Council's proposal, with modifications. We will establish joint oversight committees and share certain defensive technologies. However, the most advanced weapon systems will remain under sole human control until other species demonstrate the maturity to handle such power responsibly. General Thrax bristled at the implication. And who decides when we have achieved this maturity? You? The universe decides, Admiral Chen replied simply. When you can build weapons that manipulate space-time without destroying your own star systems, then you'll be ready to understand how they work. Elena sensed that this was as much compromise as Earth was willing to offer. The other delegates seemed to understand this as well. After some whispered consultations, Admiral Corvin nodded acceptance. Very well. The Galactic Council formally recognizes Earth as the primary defense authority. All member fleets will coordinate with human command in matters of galactic security. In return, Earth will provide protection against extinction-level threats and gradual technology transfer to allied species. As the formal votes were recorded, Elena felt a strange mixture of pride and burden settling on her shoulders. Humanity had gone from being a minor species to being the acknowledged guardian of galactic civilization in the span of a single week. The responsibility was staggering. Over the following days, Elena watched as the new order began to take shape. Human ships emerged from hiding throughout the galaxy, revealing the true scope of Earth's military network. The vessels were repositioned to create a visible defensive grid, their presence both reassuring and intimidating to the species they protected. The joint command structure was established on a new space station built in neutral space, with Admiral Chen serving as Supreme Commander and representatives from each major species filling advisory roles. The transparency requirements meant that Elena found herself busier than ever, mediating between human military priorities and alien political concerns. But the most interesting development came from an unexpected source. Within months of the new arrangement, several species began requesting not just defensive assistance, but scientific cooperation. The Vorthak wanted to understand dimensional manipulation. The Deep Current were fascinated by space-time distortion technology. Even the proud Krillians swallowed their ego enough to ask for help improving their ship designs. Elena found herself serving as liaison for these technology transfer programs, carefully managing the release of human knowledge to species that were still centuries behind Earth's scientific understanding. It was delicate work. Too much too fast could destabilize entire civilizations, but too little would leave them vulnerable if humanity ever failed in its protective role. The real test of the new system came 6 months later, when long-range sensors detected another threat approaching from the galactic rim. This time it was a hive mind species called the Collective, ancient enemies of the Devourers who had followed their trail to this galaxy. Their ships were biological constructs, constantly evolving and adapting, immune to the dimensional weapons that had defeated the Devourers. Elena watched from the Joint Command Center as Admiral Chen coordinated the response. Instead of handling the threat alone, Earth's forces worked alongside allied fleets, using human technology to enhance alien vessels, rather than replacing them entirely. Krillian dreadnoughts equipped with dimensional shields fought beside Zephyrian swarms armed with space-time disruptors. Vorthak energy ships channeled power through human-designed quantum crystals, amplifying their beam weapons to previously impossible levels. The battle was hard-fought but decisive. The Collective was defeated not by human superiority alone, but by the combined might of a galaxy that had learned to work together. When the last bioship was destroyed, Elena felt something she had never experienced before: true galactic unity. In the aftermath, as the various fleets returned to their home systems, Admiral Chen approached Elena in the command center's observation deck. They stood together, watching the stars through the massive viewport, each lost in their own thoughts. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Admiral Chen asked quietly. "Revealing ourselves, accepting the responsibility?" Elena considered the question carefully. Over the past months, she had seen humanity change from secret guardians to acknowledged protectors. The burden was enormous, but so were the rewards. The galaxy was stronger now, more united, more capable of defending itself against future threats. "Think we made the only choice we could," Elena replied. "Once the Devourers forced us to reveal our capabilities, hiding was no longer an option. Better to shape the outcome ourselves than let fear and suspicion tear the galaxy apart." "Admiral," Chen nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Earth's leadership is already planning for the next phase. Gradual withdrawal from active command as other species develop their own advanced capabilities. The goal has always been to make ourselves unnecessary." Elena smiled at that. It was such a human way of thinking, to seek power not for its own sake, but for the opportunity to eventually give it away. She wondered if the other species would ever truly understand that aspect of humanity's nature. As she watched the last human patrol ships disappear into hyperspace, Elena reflected on how much had changed since that first emergency session when the Devourers appeared.